Good morning, George Hepworth, Grover Park Consulting. The Lander Trail Foundation's online searchable database will eventually hold more than the 1,929 items it currently has. It could reach several thousand. When that happens, the number of records in our database will exceed the 2,000 maximum delegation limitation on PowerApps. Anticipating that will happen eventually, I have been experimenting with ways to load records into a PowerApps application using collections and formulas in addition just to the direct source table itself to see what's the most effective way to manage large data sets. I came to the conclusion that for most purposes, the best way to do it is going to turn out to be using the source table directly and managing the delegation limit as a secondary factor on that, rather than try to finesse it with either formulas or collections which come with their own limitations. Let me show you how. The Employees Big Data app illustrates the things that I'm discussing here with large record sets, filtering, searching, and the problem with knowing exactly how many records are in the current record set because of the delegation limit and because of the way galleries load records. The records come from a table in SQL Server called Employees. It has 300,000 employee records. That's a big enough record set to really make it clear the problems and solutions that we need to work with. The layout of the screen is a gallery on the left, a form to edit individual records on the right, a filter here in the search box that limits the number of records in our gallery to those that we want to focus on. And I added here at the top a label to display the results of our searches. The items in the gallery are filtered from the Employees table based on the contents of that search box. I added an impossible name, XXXYYYZZZ, to ensure that if the text box is blank, there will be no matching records, and therefore 0 records will show up in our gallery. As soon as we start typing letters into this search box, the gallery will attempt to match names with those records. This label displays the count. It counts the rows in the gallery, and then it counts the rows in our underlying table which match the same filter as applied to the gallery. Why did I do this? The gallery will load records from its retrieved record set, 100 records at a time. It will page 100 records. If I don't get a count of all of the records, it's potentially misleading because I will see only 100 or 200 records, not necessarily realizing that there are many more records that haven't yet been displayed in my gallery. This allows me to demonstrate to the user how many records they should be getting back. Let's run it and see what happens. Starts out with nothing. If I type the letter A, the gallery updates starting with every name, first name or last name, which includes the letter A. However, my counter says 2,000. In a record set of 300,000 records, the chances that a first name and a last name, which contains the letter A, will be exactly 2,000 are very slim. That tells me that this count is wrong and that it's based on the delegation limit. So my first attempt to get the total count doesn't work. And that leaves aside the fact that we're going to see records in paging sets of 100. Here's the solution to that. I created a method of getting the count of rows in that underlying table directly from SQL Server in a variable called varCount. Watch what happens when I use that instead. It immediately shows me that there are 246,501 names in my employee records which have the letter A either in the first or the last name. My gallery is only going to show the first 100, the second 200, then 300, then 400. And if I keep going, it will eventually get to the end. As I said before, I deliberately selected a very large, absurdly large record set to illustrate effectively, I hope, the problem here. Ideally, we never want to load more than the maximum number of records we have to load in order to meet our current requirement. In this case, we'll do ZYKH. And it starts out telling me there are 300,000. I will select the search icon to update. And it tells me that there are a total of 148 ZYKH names. There was a slight delay as this call went back to the SQL Server, did the count there, and brought it back. The trade-off there, of course, is that small delay for an accurate count. Let's see how that count is created. As I said before, it's based on a variable called varRecordCount. How do we generate varRecordCount? It's on the change event of the search field. I run a flow based on the text in the search box, which goes and gets the record count from SQL Server and sets that equal to the variable. The flow itself looks like this. We are using the PowerApps v2 connector. We add one input, which is the search term, and again, as I just pointed out, that comes from the search box on our screen. It invokes a stored procedure in SQL Server. This procedure name is dbo.RecordCount, and we pass to that stored procedure our search term, which we collected in step 1. In step 3, we send back the return code, which is the record count. The heavy lifting, again, is done on SQL Server rather than in PowerApps. PowerApps invokes that stored procedure through the flow and receives back the current count of all matching records from SQL Server. We're trading off a slight delay, a very slight delay, for an accurate count. The final thing I need to talk about is the placement of the code. Which control do I put the code on? The code that invokes the flow, which executes the stored procedure, which brings back the record count that I place in this control to signal to the user how many records they should expect in total. I could put it on a command button and say, click here to update totals. In the end, though, I decided to leave it on the change event of the searching input box. Here's the logic or the reasoning that went into that decision. The gallery, being dynamically linked through the input box with a search, will update itself each time I type a new letter. However, the onChange event only fires after that text box, input box I should say, loses its focus. So the gallery is dynamically updating itself, but we only issue one call to the server through that flow to send back our record count. That's preferable to having it fire several times. It's also preferable, from my point of view, from having the user directed to a specific command button to click here to update the count. Regardless of where the user clicks outside of that search box, the event will fire, the onChange event will fire and update the record count. That's my logic for doing it this way. You may disagree, and if you do, please let me know in the comments. At this point, we'll do one more quick demonstration without explanation, and then we'll wrap it up. $246,501 words, names, with the letter A in either the first or last name. This has not updated until I click outside of that box and I get the 0 records. The gallery updates itself, loading the first 100. Click outside of the text box. It tells me there are 678 in total, and so on. I now have a reliable way of notifying users. Look for this number of items in the gallery based on the current filtering. Regardless of whether the gallery has loaded more than the first page, more than the second page, we'll always have a count. I hope this has given you some ideas about ways to improve the interface in your apps. If you like what you saw, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe and check back frequently for updates in my next video.